act like a tool to everyone. You have to be a literal slave to the past. But second, you feel responsible for all of that. Not just you feel the pain of having to explain it, but third of all, you feel like shit because you go through the idea of childbirth because it's probably not true. You have things like therapists and counselors which can give you postnatal, prenatal care. This is important, right? Because it sounds trivial, but genuinely think about it. They're all maintenance crew. They don't have really good medical services and mental health counselors. That means pregnancy is fucking painful. And so is the process of childbirth and the process of parenting. When you have so little help in actually going through all of this, it's unclear why you want to do this. Why not just go out with a bang? What OG?
I thank the speaker for the great speech. To conclude the first half of the debate, I welcome the deputy leader of opposition. Here.
Hi, just double checking I'm audible.
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Just do a quick shout out as well. Big props to Chanmaya as well. Thank you for the experience. Big shout out to Shoya as well. I would just set my own timer and then I'll start in about 10 seconds.
Hi, there was a network issue from our side. Did you say to start the timer?
Nope.
All right.
Is the timer good to go now?
Yes, it's good to go.
Awesome. Starting
Just
in...
sorry. Just give us a count.
Yeah. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, Shaurya, unfortunately, was not going to be a DLO dump because what comes out in Chinmaya's speech is a continuation of what we continue on in this current day and age. What does that mean? That means when OG comes and talks about automation, it's kind of like flying a plane. They unnecessarily complicate logistics to confuse what the issue is. It's like machines that are needed to go through all the process and logistics and algorithms, but you need oversight in case you need to pull and reset something, redo wire and basic mechanisms. Keep in mind that humans understand that everyone is not going to be an electrical engineer. Then playing sports, which is what we get the bulk of this actualization. If the ship is breaking, where does the leeway of resources lie on government as a whole in accordance with the ship? It's bound to include everything needed to be essential to ensure survival, which means that a medical operating theater and medical equipment is more likely to happen than to have footballs or mass information uploaded on gigabytes of storage that you need to pertain. What is then our constructive case that occurs? First, on the need of purpose and why this is an anthropocentric mandate. Secondly, on childbearing and relationships. Third, on hope in the meaning of life and what that actually represents. And lastly, on the order of structures. Pardon my dog barks a lot in the background. On the need of purpose, we think that a person lacks any continuous to what their life goal is, which means that to assess what their life goal is in the way that OG says they're going to suddenly explore the interest, meaning they haven't had the basis of art and science to say that I now like this because these simple structures are not there. That means under Maslow's order of needs, you need to survive, and objectively to ensure survival, there's a biological and natural hierarchy that's natural insofar as it's a product of our natural relationship in terms of social interactions and our basic idea of possession. This means on the anthropocentric mandate that I as a person, the time that I as a person can sacrifice or instrumentalize other humans' lives, knowing the risk to them, I'm far more likely to instrumentalize non-human life as well, and non-human ideas, and similarly find dissatisfaction, disillusionment, things such as pursuing independent hobbies, interests. This means that my desire to reorient my relationship with hope, which is fundamentally what government's going to present in different ways, it cannot reorient the way that government claims, because that same pattern of viewing is what didn't reorient our relationship with the planet Earth, which is what caused humans to go essentially extinct. And we think principally this becomes unlikely for twofold reasons. First, on childbearing and relationships. We think this is bound to be far more personal in nature and exists as a carry down of lived experiences, stories, and hopes and dreams, where your mother from Africa shows you an amulet that came from history that she smuggled in because she couldn't carry much, or someone shows one tree that they managed to carry, or a shred of wheat, or a certain type of book that exists. This means that the basic time spent with a child is exponentially higher on average because you're locked in a ship, and that solitude gives space for discussions about what the core core concepts are, that's not a staple in status quo, which is why OG and calls it brainwashing. This means relationships are more likely to be interpersonal, seeing the same people for existence in close quarters, where you hold that piece of necklace very dear to you because that's what's carried down from your generation of people who came before you. This means that you cultivate a narrative of shared bonds on average, meaning that A, you're more open to having children on the general status quo. There's also a considerate share of empathetic actions and give and take due to a close proximity. It doesn't exist in normal life. That means taking the step to say that I'm going to potentially risk the mission with the emotional side includes, and OG does not deal with the gravity of this, is likely to create things such as cognitive dissonance and the depression that they mentioned. Why is this so then on the counter on our side? We think that in the idea of the hope and the meaning of life, that at the time the mission may fail in the motion slide, we think this shows the crux of balance that the ship exists in. We think there's twofold. First, we think it's reasonable to consider that it existed there. You're in the middle generation, so you have to have some reasonable faith that the plan will work. It wouldn't have gone through whatever amount of light years if it didn't. We don't think OG can strawman nuts and bolts. This means that the summation of your parents' experiences, hopes, artifacts that a person deeply craves, and they truly crave this because it's a continuance of their origin for all intents and purposes, a symbol of fixation that people have toward religions on the basis as well. Thus, the emotional turmoil that OG flags out as a harm is outweighed fundamentally in comparison to the hope of a future. Why is this so? Because the turmoil of OG is due to the lack of fulfillment of one's capacity of life. We explained to you that the capacity cannot be any fairly organically measured in OG or government's case, which bans any ability for them to say that someone suddenly is going to explore. We think they have to present an array of options to do so. But when that occurs, the meaning of life in such situations focus on where that fulfillment can truly arise, which if the ship is so bad as OG claims tension within their speech, they clearly can't find any type of actual fulfillment there beyond just 5 minutes of saying, ooh, I've got to do something slightly interesting. This turns back to Man's Search for Meaning with Frankl, which showcases how that focuses inherently on one's existence in times of harm, which means that a mother jumps into the harm for her child to continue the existence of what fundamentally carries the highest hope of survival in your very primitive mind. This means that thus seeing the number of few people on the ship, or even that OG tries to strawman, we think this reinforces the stories of millions and billions of people, of humans dead, the actual horrors of people who simply didn't care and couldn't take the bullet when it was necessary. We think this is how we are bound to increase empathy, and we think that one's origin then plays one of the most deterministic structures within their life, which means compared to things such as religion, such as faith, or even such as other personal attributes, the idea of humanity becomes much higher, and we think that's a conglomerating force that OG just strawmans. Then on the order of structures, and lastly, what lies in the ascentive there. But before, on the order of structure, before that, I will take a PO from OG.
Okay, so look, you don't have a hope of the future because you know you'll never see it, but you've been stuck with a responsibility, which means you're one of 1,000 out of 300 generations. Why not be the one generation that gives freedom to the few people left and find that value in yourself and your life?
Very much so. Into my next constructive order of structures. All resources are padded at the opportunity necessarily, or were essentially provided at the opportunity cost of that you could maybe have saved just one person on planet Earth, or even allow them to live comfortably for a period of time. At the time, there's a mandated set of rules, breaking them as an individual with one social nexus, keeping that government can't prove what the intents of these actors are and the fact that they're suddenly a conglomerate, same as we can't prove necessarily that they're going to be on the counter that exists. We think that breaking them is likely to fracture the tight social nexus that I as an individual enjoy. Thus, unless government wants to argue the person is suicidal, essentially, we think that the social stigma and isolation is likely to combine with a lack of fulfillment to cause severe effects that they talk about. Where do you have cognitive dissonance, depression? And as someone with literally no way out to seek the fulfillment that you may crave, we think a person will be highly unlikely to when they're aware of these options. Then what do we bring lastly on incentive? We think even in the case of the selfish actors that exist, there becomes an incentive in the fact that you're likely to see this as a way to gain control and power in the new world, which is a powerful surety in the continuance of wanting this mission to succeed, which means that even if the politics that they mention may exist for control, it's not the carrying of the mission in particular. Lastly, on the argument of not being a parent, just having children, we think with alternatives such as being a sperm donor or a surrogate, for example, this does not mean the biological necessities upon you to be with someone who's of opposite gender. We think even the nuances that are there simply fall case in OGs.
And particularly in like a philo hypothetical motion, if one thing changes, their analysis doesn't stand, they needed to give us overarching reasons as to why to do this and why not to do this.
Proof of OG, proof of OO, both of them, right? So like, what did OO tell us? They basically like,
give us like this said a bunch of things, but they never actually give us a concrete reason as to why to have a kid and what the benefits are, apart from saying we can do sports and pass on human history, as well as some completely ungrounded obligation to humanity, right? Like they just say it exists, but they never ground it. And I think to a certain extent, that's why opening up the Lucis debate integrated response to that as well. OG talks about how life will be sad. Okay, fair enough. And then they go on to say, like, don't see future benefits, and there'll be like likely some marginal benefits, like we have more time to spend, etc. I think these are like micro impacts. On firstly, what is our extension? What is our case, right? First thing, the life on the ship and the duty of like continuously maintaining the ship and like owing your entire life to this is akin to slavery, i.e. we think we ought not to have future children and like ought not to do this because we reject the enslavement by the ship